Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Omari Kamal. I am the CEO and founder of P&G Advisors. The P&G pun very much intended rather, is for profit and growth. We are accountants, we are tax planners, tax advisors, and we are business consultants. And we're not just any old type of accountant, tax advisor, and business consultant. Just with every profession, there are certain specialties that we all have. There are certain types of lawyers, certain types of doctors, and there are certain types of accountants. And the types of accountants that we are is that we are uniquely interested in that your small business profits and it grows. What does that mean exactly? Well, what that means, what that has to do with is that one day I was having a meeting with a client. I used to be an investment advisor years ago, and I met with. I love meeting with small business owners because they always seem to be the smartest tools in the shed. They're easy to get along with. They're salespeople. Like all business owners, I find are fundamentally salespeople at heart. And when they are engaged in something, in a new relationship, it's always really straightforward with small business owners. Like, look, either I see the value or I don't. And they'll always be really straightforward about that. And I love meeting with small business owners when I was an investment advisor. And there's this one investment advisor. One day I was laying out my investment proposal for him, and he says to me, he says, Omari, this sounds great, and I want to do everything you're telling me to do, but can I be real with you for a second? And I'm like, sure. He says, it sounds to me that you're wanting me to invest in Motorola and GM and Facebook and all these other great Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. Is that accurate? And I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely accurate. I want you to invest in them. He says, and that's great. And I know I need to do that for my own, financial posterity. But here's the issue that I'm having. I see myself as my own best investment. Can you teach me how to have somebody do for me what you're doing for these other companies, which is raise money for them so they can expand their operations? Because isn't that fundamentally what you're doing? Like, I know you're looking out for me, but you're also looking out for these other companies, aren't you? And he stumped me. And I said, yeah, I guess I am, sort of. And he says, well, that's fine. I know you should do that, but I want to find out how people can invest in me. I want to figure out how to grow this investment called my small business. And you guys, that triggered something in me. And I didn't know how to answer him in that moment. And I actually spent the next decade and a half of my life trying to figure out how to get it and answer that question. And I think in the last several years, we finally figured out with an assortment of philosophies that we love to share with our clients, i.e. the Profit First method, the Value Builder method, as well as the EOS traction method. And we'll get way more into that in other modules. You can find out more information about that on our blog. But one of the ways in which we want to begin to get at that for small business owners is to create these conversations. This is in part what the index conversation is about and what our entire practice is about, which is teaching small business owners how to build and to grow the best investment we believe that they'll ever make, which is their small business. And as an access to doing that, one of the things that we love to do in these podcasts is bring to you experts who could bring to you different dimensions of what this broader conversation of financial freedom through entrepreneurship entails. And I'm very pleased and excited to bring to you a very dear friend of mine. In fact, he's probably one of my oldest friends, like top 3 oldest friends. We go all the way back to college and the Navy and the Naval Academy together. His name is Kendall Anderson. He's a very prominent attorney in the Chicagoland area, and he has a number of practice areas, one of which being real estate, another of which being estate planning, another of which being business law. And he's been gracious enough to bless us and grace us with his presence here. We're going to have an estate planning conversation, in particular about how estate planning connects with entrepreneurship and small business ownership. So Kendall, hey, we call him K-Tone around the way. Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on, man. This is a valuable and important conversation to have. As you know, I'm from Mississippi, and we get a lot of platitudes down there, and I can always hear my granddaddy saying, well, if you're gonna fail a plan, you're definitely planning to fail. So that's what this is about. We're trying to get people to plan so they don't fail. So
yeah, well, you can't claim that one for Mississippi. That one is pretty universal. We all know that one. I mean, Mississippi does have some platitudes. Now, you may not hear it in the accent, everybody, because I spent a little bit more of my young life in Chicago, but I'm from Mississippi too. Don't Kendall sometimes calls into question my credentials, but I just want to make that clear for the record. But look, welcome, man. I thank you for being on, man. So we're here to talk about estate planning, and there's just to provide a little context, because I know a lot of people who are listening and would be listening to this know what estate planning is. But let me just create a little context for the people who don't, or really don't have a lot of context for what we're going to talk about. So let me just share my experience, because remember I said I used to be an investment advisor. And even though my specialty was investments, that's how I got paid, I had to talk about everything. And I would ask each and every one of my clients 5 or 6 very critical questions. And the questions were these. Number one, I'd always ask people like, hey, what are you going to do? And a lot of times I would meet with couples, married couples, because they're usually when people get married and start to have families, when they really start to think about their financial decisions. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's how it is a lot of times. And one of the first questions I would ask, especially if I was talking to a couple, is, Mr. Customer, Mr. Client, what happens to you, your wife? Like, what's the plan if, God forbid, you don't wake up tomorrow? And they'd always be sort of stumped for a moment. Like, what do you mean? What happens? Like, what insurance do I have? Like, not really. I'm not asking what insurance you have, at least not yet. But I'm asking, what is she going to do? What's the plan? They'd almost never have a plan. So to your point, Kendall, what's the plan? Or then I would ask, after we dealt with that for a little bit, I'd say, well, now, what's your plan, Mrs. Client, if, God forbid, you become, in the more likely case, incapacitated in some way? You can't work anymore. You need to be cared for. What does your husband do? And there'd be this pause most of the time. What are you asking? If I have long-term care insurance, disability insurance? I mean, no, I'm not asking you just that yet. Eventually I will. I'm asking, what happens? What's the plan? Almost never would have a plan. I'd ask them other questions like, hey, what does retirement look like for you? Not just the day you retire, but 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years thereafter. Almost never had a clear-cut plan for that. Who do you need to educate? And what plans have you put in place to make sure that you can educate the people in your life that you need to, that want to? Wouldn't be able to answer that question with any level of clarity. And then my last question, and this has direct correlation to what it is that we're talking about today, KT, is assuming that we can create a highly efficient tax way in which to do so. Who do you want to leave a legacy for? Who do you want your wealth to go to? Assuming, again, we can find a highly efficient tax way to do so. Now, if they didn't have questions of any of that other stuff, and most of the time they didn't, they almost never had a answer that question. And so we started to have these conversations. I explained it as best I could about, okay, there's wills, there's trusts, there's all different types of trusts. There are entities. There are all types of ways that you can construct this stuff. So, Kendall, I wonder if you could just kind of give us a broad brush overstroke of like, what is the importance of having a will, having a trust in place? What's the difference between the two? But like, more than anything else, why is this so important from your vantage point for people, in particular small business owners, to have some type of a will mechanism in place?
Well, it's kind of twofold. Most of the small business entrepreneurs or people who own small businesses, that small business is their main source or primary source of income, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to put all this work in and planning and doing this thing, and you don't protect yourself from liability.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna kind of bifurcate that, but since we're talking about the small business being a driver of income personally, I'll kind of go over the personal aspects of estate planning, some high level things you should know about. Everybody knows about a will, and people think wills is a one-stop shop that fix all for the most part.
Right.
And a will is good, and it basically just a direction of telling people, hey, look, once I leave, this is what I want to happen to my things.
Right.
The only thing about that is once you transition, there's a lot of steps that you have to go through to effectuate that will.
Yeah.
The big picture, without getting into the weeds, is more so than not, it's called probate.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to go to court. You're gonna have to get it probated. You're gonna have to get on a lawyer, and that probate situation can get very expensive depending on if your family members get along or they don't, or how complicated your assets are. In my experience, my family, depending on how much is left, tends to be a little bit more aggressive in fighting each other. But they're not as much as a family after somebody transitions.
Right.
Is what I would say. So another thing is, if you don't have a will in place, you go through what's called intestate, or the government has a set of rules. It goes to this person, that person, this person.
Right.
And that's not always so cut and dry, because you have step kids and adopted kids, and that could get to be messy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where you're at with a will. Now, a trust, do you have to have a trust? No. But I would strongly suggest a trust, because a trust keeps you from having to go through probate, because it's a little bit more specific about where you want your assets to go after you transition.
Yeah.
The good thing about a trust is the ones that we recommend is a revocable living trust, which means that it's flexible. So if you have certain things, or you're in a certain situation, maybe you and your wife get a divorce and you need to make some changes, it's a lot easier to curtail or modify that living trust than it will be the whole will to go through that process. Now, also with Illinois, there's other things you can do. You can do a transfer of death instrument, basically saying that when I die, my house goes here.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But when talking about this, the one thing I want everybody to get is that estate planning is not a snowflake, if you will. It's just not one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
It needs to be curtailed, and it needs to be modified for your own practical purposes.
Got
if
it.
not, you're going to overpay or underpay, or you're not going to really get the desired results you need. Going on into the business side, you want to have estate planning to pass it on, but you also want to have some type of layer of protection between your business.
Yeah.
Because if you get into some type of issue, let's say somebody has a slip and fall in your business, and it gets to be gruesome, you want to protect your personal assets. You don't want, if they decimate your company, to get into your personal assets. You touched on it earlier. You definitely want to kind of have a succession plan where you know who the key partners are, who you should train, who should transfer, what would happen if something should go wrong. You want buy and sell agreements. Maybe you don't want your business to go on the open market. Maybe you want to write a first refusal for your family members to be able to buy this property.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is minimizing taxes. There's a tax threshold. Now, if memory serves me correct, I think anything over $3 million in the state of Illinois, your estate will be taxed. So you want to be able to, we're not saying you want to do anything wrong, but you want to mitigate those taxes as much as legally and humanly possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they also want insurance, and you want powers of attorney for certain instances. So I could go on and on and on, because there's so many aspects of
no, but you're hitting on some powerful stuff, Ken. I mean, so first of all, just to underline a couple of things, right?
Right.
In my experience with clients, and we start talking about estate planning, one of the first things I just absolutely love to hear, because a lot of times I wouldn't have to say anything, people would catch themselves when they say, "Oh, my son and my daughter, they're not gonna fight over this little bit of stuff." And then I shoot them a look, right? Like you said, what you say? Fight over this little $500,000, you said?
Oh man.
And they said, "Well, yeah, you're right. We should just go ahead. Just let's put something in place." And they because they started to see, because they what happens is it takes for them to remember the last time somebody in their family,
that's correct,
had something that needed to be split up or didn't have anything. There's always one family member, and maybe I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times there's a family member who's suspicious of that somebody has withheld something from the other, and then that becomes a subject of a much larger debate, and in some instances litigation. And so in any way that you can keep your family from that, where you can put everything out on the table in as seamless a way as possible, You want to be able to do that. If you love your family enough to have accumulated this wealth for them, and you're even interested in remotely having the conversation and organizing things for people so that they can be free to grieve, as opposed to shifting through all your paperwork to try to figure out what was there, and then likewise how to communicate what was or wasn't there to the other people that are around you, because very few of us are going to pass away quietly in the night. There's always a process of becoming incapacitated, and then there's typically one family member who kind of comes up and bears the burden for a lot of that process for us passing on to the next generation, and likewise that person becomes the caretaker of our assets. But likewise that person becomes the whipping post for a lot of the other family who may think that they're entitled to something. So to make life easier on them as well as easier on the rest of the family, you want to start to put things in place. And the first things you have to deal with, again, this is the second thing to underline, is that probate process. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Kim, but that I've been told that process takes on average 18 to 24 months in order to get through, and where the courts will review the will to make sure that everybody that is getting what you said should in fact be getting that. Is that in the ballpark for how that process works?
Yeah, that's very accurate. And I would also go on to say that the larger your estate, the larger that process, or the longer that process could take place. You hit a key word. I know we're not having a counseling session or come to Jesus or prayer meeting today, but I will tell you this: everybody grieves differently.
Yeah.
And a lot of times their grief is fighting over relics that they've attached themselves to.
Yeah.
And a lot of times unnecessarily, because every time you go to court, I'm here to tell you, as a lawyer, the lawyer gets paid. And all that money is coming out of the state, whereas if they were together, they could use it for people that's here instead of people that's transitioned on.
Very good.
That is definitely the case. 18 to 20 months. And this is another thing you brought up. One thing about a will can be contested.
Yeah.
Oh, mama didn't say that. That ain't a signature. That say February. We were in Texas in February. No way they could, and it goes on and on and on infinitum. And the whole time the bank account is going down and down and down.
Exactly. That's something to consider. But likewise, or conversely, the trust is not going through the probate process. It's not subject to court review. Another group of people who can contest the will too are creditors, right? So if that person has creditors, they're searching the public record constantly for seeing who passed away and see what they can be entitled to, because creditors get their money before anybody else does, so they can write whatever they want to in the will. But if so-and-so creditor says, hey, look, I have rights over that property too, they're going to make that petition and they're going to get that money as well. So not just having it be organized, but having it be a private process that avoids the probate process completely is why you want to have a trust in place, right? In addition to the will, or is it a substitute for the will? See,
actually, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Actually, no. The will could be a portion of your living trust.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, there's going to be some things that's going to come up,
right,
that we may not have anticipated in the trust. For instance, maybe we forgot to include that $10,000 life insurance policy that you had at your bank that you checked on 20 years ago that we forgot about. Well, when that check comes, who's going to be able to negotiate it? Who's going to ever be able to cash it?
Right.
And you're going to kind of have to get that will to take care of that. I think what people don't understand, and this may be a great conversation, is when you're creating a trust, you're essentially creating a business, and you're giving your stuff to this business, but you control the business until you transition.
I see. And
then the trust says, well, after I transition, person A or nephew A or daughter B is going to be in control of the business. And with it being a business, without getting too far in the weeds, it's a juridical person. It means it has its own life, if you will. So everything is kind of isolated within that life. And it also prevents you from having to pay taxes because you've already transitioned it. The business owns it at this point, or the trust owns it at this point.
Right.
So it's a lot of nuances that's extremely beneficial. Unfortunately, what happens is, and I know I'm just running with this, I'm just thinking about clients that I've had. I get a client come in and say, hey, I want to do a consultation. Fine, what you got? We go through everything. The trust is gonna come. I can draft you a will, $200, whatever.
Mhm.
But I can draft you a trust. It may be $2,000 or more, depending on how much stuff you got.
Sure.
But what they don't realize is you're gonna pay now or you're gonna pay later.
Yeah.
Because if you invest in what that trust is gonna cost you now, you're gonna save your family tens
a
of
multiple of
millions
that.
of thousands of dollars in taxes,
Yeah.
legal fees, and stress, man. You don't want your family members fighting when they should be grieving and trying to become whole so they can live forward and have a more productive life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Kendall. And what I hear you pointing to there as well is like, so there's an important distinction for everybody listening that you want to really get your head around. Like for anybody that works a regular W-2 job, this is something that you should be considering. But when you have a business, there's a whole other assortment of considerations that you would have, and you was pointing to them earlier, Kendall. There's this idea of having different locations. A number of our clients have different locations that each one of those locations presents a different liability risk that you want to take into account as you go through this estate planning process. If you have partners or key executives, key men or key women that are a part of your business that you want to make sure are protected, their interests are protected. These are things that you want to not just be in communication with your estate planning attorney about, but you actually want to have your insurance agent be involved in these conversations as well. Like these are sort of quasi board meetings that you want to have. And like you said earlier, I mean, each estate plan is its own sort of snowflake. I mean, it has its own sort of characteristics, and it really is going to be custom to the person. But the idea of it is that at the end of it, you should have a clear answer to this question of, hey, what's my plan? What's my family's plan for how we're going to go about this process of creating generational wealth? So, and I know you could go on and on, Kendall, but let me just ask you this. I mean, before we get off of the sort of the trust conversation, you mentioned living trust, like revocable trust. Now, there's a such thing as irrevocable trusts, aren't there? If you could just, I know this is a huge subject, right? But if you could just touch lightly on how people and why people want to consider revocable versus irrevocable, and what any of that stuff could mean for them.
I mean, not to get too far, you kind of want a living revocable trust because it's fluid. It's things happen, business climates happen. Yeah. Your income change. You want to be able to, I don't want to insult anybody intelligent, but you just definitely want to be able to make changes when changes need to be made.
Right.
I run into a lot of clients who have a blended family, which can get to be touchy when both parties are bringing in children and they're building wealth together. Now it's like, well, whose kids gonna benefit from what we built? And you may love their kids, but we tend to love our kids a little more for whatever reason, and that creates a problem. So you kind of want a revocable trust, and you kind of want to keep it fluid.
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, look, we have to be careful about how many podcasts we do, because Kendall and I go way back, and so those of you who are paying careful attention, you'll see that there are times where we'll just start breaking out into laughter because he and I both know what word got triggered of another thought that leads to a whole other set of conversations that we can't necessarily talk about over the airwaves. But I will make a candid set of remarks. So I myself am a member of a blended family. I had a son from a prior marriage, and I have two younger sons with my now wife. And we're one big happy family. We all love each other, and we get along just fine. And we're great. And we've again, just we're as blended as they come. The thing is blended to a smooth consistency. We all love each other madly, and that's just how that is. And we were having a conversation one day, my wife and her cousin, and we were talking about our estate plan or the makings of what our estate plan would be. And so I said, well, look, our house, for example, I'm going to if the house goes, if my wife predeceases me and the house goes to me, then I die, then the house should go 3 ways to the boys. Is that right? And that ended up being a very long conversation that
Yes.
yeah, I had to learn some things with respect to, because I had to learn that even though I think I'm being fair to my oldest son, he has a whole other family on his mother's side that he's entitled to their assets that my younger boys don't have access to, and vice versa. And all of that stuff needs to be taken into account.
Right.
And it's not as obvious as it seems when you work in those family dynamics. And more families are blended now than ever have been before. And it really is important to have a professional, because I mean, I was like, that's obvious. Of course it would get split 3 ways evenly. But they're like, no, it doesn't quite work that way, because even though you think you're being fair, you're not being fair, because Omari will be doing inheritance. Omari Jr. will be doing inheritance, from his mother's side of the family. And the assets that roll down from Taj and Amir's side of the family wouldn't necessarily affect Omari. So there's an art, if you will, to this process of making sure that everyone is being treated fairly. But what I will say, Kendall, is that as tough as those conversations may be, they're worthwhile, particularly for folks in the African American community, because having conversations about multi-generational wealth is something that we sort of shake our fist at and we applaud and we amen. But how many of us are really actually getting into the weeds of this, discovering it for ourselves, and developing real plans to leave legacies for our families, for our communities, and so on? So, Kendall, with that, I know I'm on a soapbox with respect to that, but I wanted to just have you really just touch on, in your experience, what are people's general attitudes when they talk about estate plan? I mean, generally, I imagine when they call you, they're ready to go. But what do you find are some of the stumbling blocks and some of the issues that people have, things that they get confused about, things that they're not really 100% clear about, that you end up having to kind of pick apart and explain for folks?
Sure. I'm gonna continue with one other point about the difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust. I tried to hit the biggest thing for me is flexibility. With a revocable trust, with an irrevocable trust, there also sometimes, at least what I would call them, like a blind trust. And that means you put all your assets in this trust and you let another person run it. And you can't really dictate how it's ran or make any changes or get it back. It's like I know when one of the presidents was running, he had to take, because he was so rich, they wanted to put his company in a blind trust and it had to be ran so there wouldn't be any conflicts.
Right.
And so, like, for the small business owner, I don't think we would run into many in that situation. So you definitely want an irrevocable trust. Revocable trust, so you live in trust so you can make those changes.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest things that I run into is people just uneasiness to deal with death or incapacity.
Sure.
Death is undefeated. It's going to happen. But when you try to have a straight up conversation about what's going to happen, it forces people to kind of delve into their mortality in like an unhealthy way. And that creates fear. Also, life moves so fast. Sometimes people think, well, I can do it tomorrow. Sure. I got all this stuff going on. I'll get it done tomorrow. And I could tell you, out of 10 cases, you may have 2 or 3 that did it the right way. And you got 7 or 8 families trying to figure out how we're going to bury this person, what's going to happen to their assets, what's going to happen to their kids. And unwillingly, you create stress until not on just the family, but the whole community. Because you know how typically we are. We call around, we call the church, we call our friends to help us with these issues.
Right.
Also, there's a lot of misinformation. People make up stuff. You can. All you got to do is this. That is, just sign the check. That's not what.
Or just add me to your house. Just
put me on your house, and I'll take care of you. That I suggest everybody go speak to an attorney. Just you can make your own decisions, but get some solid facts. They're entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. There are very strict laws that the courts go by if it goes to court. And it's not, sometimes there's a little subjectivity, but most of the time it's either A, or B.
Hmm.
And if you didn't do A, it's gonna be B. And I think also not having those conversations before they come to the attorney office is an issue, because a lot of times one party will come in and they'll say, "Oh, well, I already know, but we're gonna split the house 3 ways between the boys." But the other party is like, "It's not really what I had in mind," and then other issues bubble to the top. So I would say that, and also the money thing. But I can tell you that I've had clients that I've drawn wheels for.
Mm-hmm.
Their family end up calling me back, and as I'm helping them through it, you know, I'm a nice guy. I'm helping through it. We talking through it, what they need to do. I always hear some form of, "Man, I wish we'd have did that living trust."
Sure.
Because we could have had everything laid out. We could have shared it with the family. Everybody could have knew what to expect or have a general idea of what this looking like. And understanding is the best thing in the world, especially when you're dealing with people grieving. So
yeah. No, those are some good points, and I recognize a few of them for myself. And I think I told the story wrong earlier. It wasn't if she predeceased me; it was if I predeceased her, because I was saying, like, okay, if I die, my half of the house should go to Omar Jr., and the other half should be split between, you and the two boys.
Yeah.
It didn't go well, y'all. It didn't go well. We figured it out. We're figuring it out. Let me put it that way.
Well, I tell you what, you brought up another point. Sometimes it's not a matter of who's getting it, but in what proportions. That can be an argument,
Right, exactly.
A third, or half, and they split a third.
Exactly.
It seems like it's intuitive until you start getting into the weeds, and
exactly.
And it can kick off a world war. I'm telling you, I've seen some families who just don't deal with each other no more because of what happened after grandma died, because she was the matriarch,
Yeah. No, you never can quite prepare for what those family financial battles will lead into in terms of discord. So, no, I get it. So I know you kind of touched on this before, Kendall, but why don't you just break down again for us, like, what are the documents? What are some of the essential documents that are needed in this process? You mentioned will, you mentioned trust, but kind of what are some of the other ones that the powers of attorney, that in general, people just want to be educating themselves about, and likewise making notes to talk to their attorneys about?
Yeah, one big thing is, if you give somebody a power of attorney and you die, that authority no longer exists. They can't speak on your behalf anymore. That's one of the biggest things. Well, grandma died last week, but Joe had the power of attorney. Yeah. Well, when grandma died, Joe don't have
the word is had. What is that? Right.
Joe not control anything anymore. So
so who has the authority post death?
Post death. Now, one thing you may, and some of this can go, if you have a small business, you can kind of work them in conjunction. But another power of attorney that's crucial is the health power of attorney.
Yeah.
And you also can split that up, and you can have a health power of attorney. You can have somebody that kind of controls your estates, your assets, your funds. I have seen individuals, which I thought was pretty wise. They had multiple children. One of the children were health care, like a nurse or a doctor. So they will allow that person to kind of handle the healthcare portion. Because when you get sick, some parents, some family members say, "Hey, look, I hate to be so morbid, but pull the plug." And other ones like, "No, let's try this surgery." And you get an impasse, and the doctor doesn't know who to listen to. So you want to be able to choose the person who you feel is most qualified to make the best decision on your behalf as far as your healthcare goes when you're unable to.
Yeah, that's another big debate in my household, Kendall. Like I've told my wife, like, if I'm incapacitated, if I'm in a vegetative state for longer than 24 hours, and doctors have said this is terminal and they have no clear prognosis for how this thing's going to turn out, pull that plug. And she's like, "Nope, I'm keeping you along. I'm going to sit there next to you for the next 20 years. And I'm like, "Nope, no." That's why I had to call my mother, like, "Hey, Mom, look, I need you to sign on this healthcare power of attorney." And she's absolutely with it. She's like, "I will pull the plug on you in a minute," which I don't know what that says about my relationship with my mother, but my wishes will be adhered to in that regard. But another issue to work through for sure.
No, you remind me of a situation where, and this is a pretty astute family, college graduates. And there was a situation where they didn't really formalize their estate planning, but they always had a lot of talks about it.
Yeah.
And there was clear-cut talks that father, who was an electrician, had the same position you did.
Yeah.
If I'm in some type of vegetative state for a period of time, hey, y'all let me go
to
my maker.
Yeah.
And everybody in their family was aware of that. Everybody in their family admitted to me that they heard that.
Mm-hmm.
But baby girl was not going. She did not want to let, even though she heard it, she said it, she admitted it, and litigation ensued about who was going to be able to make this decision. And it was a gray area because his wife had transitioned. So really, it was just him and the siblings. So it's like, which one of them makes the decision? Now you're increasing a fight between them and a division between your family long term after you pass. Where if you just say, hey, look, Junior has the power of attorney for medical, and whatever Junior say, I need y'all to respect it and live with it.
Yeah.
Same thing with finances, just, on another level. So
yeah, no, well said. Yeah. So and we're coming close to the end of our time, Kendall. You really have to come back, and I'd love to get into the other side of what you touched on and what I know that you're really great at, which is the legal side of small business ownership in general. Like there's estate planning, which we talked about mostly today, but then there's business legal considerations that we want to get into and perhaps explore some of those scenarios and considerations that entrepreneurs around the city of Chicago and across the country would and should have. So, but before we go, Kendall, any just parting words that you want to share with the audience?
I would, I'll make it quick. I really suggest that you consult with an estate planning attorney, whether you have a small business or not. I would also recommend that you get your personal effects in order first.
Yeah.
And it makes transitioning and organizing the business side a whole lot easier.
Yeah, very good. Definitely. It as my wife would say, it always pays to have good counsel.
Yeah.
So definitely, with that, certainly that would be the case in this instance, and as well as many others, I'm sure. But with that said, how can people reach you, Kendall?
I'm going to give you my email address and my personal my work cell phone number. Okay. Sure. Omari told you that I'm from Mississippi. And I am in Chicago and I'm licensed in Illinois, but I maintain some semblance of Mississippi by using my Mississippi cell phone number. Oh. I inevitably people call me and they're like, "Are you in Chicago?" Like, yes.
Let it go, brother. Let it go, man. You've been here for way too long. Man, to not have a 312-773-708 something.
I got to hold on to my roots. Okay, so 601-641-1411. I don't know if for some of your older people, you used to have to dial information 1411 to find out the telephone number. So if you need some information, 601-641-1411. I'm from Mississippi, so I can be trusted. That's another one of the reasons why I hold on.
That part is true.
I'll let you pull that together as you will.
Okay.
And my email address is kanderson@andersonlaw.us. kanderson@andersonlaw.us. Also, reaching out to you is a great way to get in contact with me, because as you know, your consulting business and the accounting business and estate planning goes hand in hand, and we've sent customers across the line who needed help. So
of course,
either way.
Of course, absolutely.
I also want to thank you, man. It's been an honor and a privilege to come on your platform and speak to your followers, and I hope I helped somebody today.
I'm sure you did. You even helped me, and I appreciate that. And I feel like I need to go apologize for some of the things I said in these conversations. But yeah, be in touch with Attorney Anderson. He's an extraordinary human being. He cares about the people that he works with, and he does great work. So I trust him, and I would recommend that you do as well. So again, let's get something else on the schedule, Kendall, about some small business considerations. Let's keep this going. And anything that anybody out there listening needs to know, be in touch with him, be in touch with us, like he said. Profitandgrowth.com. You can set up a meeting with us anytime, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay. So with that said, everybody, thank you so much for listening this far into the Index podcast. We appreciate you all. Talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.